All right, welcome everyone to Runners Roundtable podcast. And in this episode, it's another bonus episode, but it's going to be a little bit different because now I'm going to be the one that's interviewed. And I have Jen Steele here with me. She was one of the coaches that I interviewed during the 26 Run Coaches conversations that I had. So I'm so excited that you're here, Jen. And I just want to tell everyone kind of the story of how this even came together today, because I think it was maybe even a Monday. I don't even remember what day it was, but I know I was driving my kids to school. And on the drive to school, I was thinking, oh, how cool would it be if someone interviewed me about London? But like, who can I ask? I don't want to be weird about it. And later that day, you sent me a message saying, okay, this might be a little bit weird and out there, but how about I interview you? And I just remember thinking, okay, universe, I see you, I hear you. It's totally serendipitous. So I'm just so excited to be here to have this conversation with you. And also just so grateful that the timing worked out the way it did, because I feel like I've done so much processing in the almost 2 weeks post London. So thanks for being here. Please remind us all who you are and what you do before we get into all the London talk.
Yes. So I am Jen Steele. I am a run coach. I live in San Diego, but I work with athletes all over the world. And I'm also a mom of 2 young girls. My daughters are a lot younger than yours. Yeah. And I was having so much fun following along, like your training journey and all the rest of it. And somebody needs to talk to you about, like, I want to know all the nitty gritty. It's like, somebody needs to talk to her. She has a podcast. It's like, wait, I should. I'm sure she's not even thinking about it. So
I like I said, I love the way it came together because it was the same day. And I just remember vividly thinking about it on the car drive to school with my kids of, man, I wish someone would interview me so that I'm not just talking all the time. So it worked out. I'm going to now take my host hat off and pass it on to you and let you take the reins here.
Perfect. We're going to trade places from the last time I was here.
That's right.
So every big event and every day, my family does, we call it, we've expanded it. So we do a rose, a thorn, a bud, and a leaf, which is the best, the worst, something you're grateful for, and something you're looking forward to. And so I thought it would be really fun if we did it for the race. But also, I know that when I was following along on your journey, like the getting there too, I want to know about both, because it was an international race. And I know that when I have runners that do these, either traveling, across the country, I'm in California. So when I have friends that do New York or Boston, or I've had some runners that were in London as well, or that do Berlin or Tokyo, like there's a lot that goes into it and a lot more that you have to think about it. So I thought we could start with kind of covering those 4 things for both your trip and the race. But let's start with the trip and then we'll get into all the things race.
All right. So I'll say that the trip part, the trip part was probably the most interesting. I had, what was it? Probably a week before we left, I had this dream that I had left all our passports in America and that we were in England at like whatever the customs was. And it was at that point that I realized it. So I was very paranoid about our passports. That was the one thing that I got so caught up with. Where are the passports? I would check them. There's 4 of us. So myself, my husband, my 2 girls. Every day.
Your girls went with you, right?
My girls went, okay. Yes. So my daughters, like you said, they're 13 and 11. They came along for this trip. And I bought, and I still have it here, like this special little pouch. Shout out to my friends who recommended this to me. They're like, you need to get the little passport pouch. And I was like, okay, no problem. But I would open that up daily and count 1, 2, 3, 4. I would look at the expiration date as if something was going to magically change from one day to the next. But I was so paranoid about our passports. Then the day before we left, I started to get worked up about my gels and whether I could travel with my gels, because my travel plan was, and so that everybody knows how this trip panned out for us, is we were in London for 3 days. Marathon day was day 4. And then we were in London another 3 days. So the marathon was smack dab in the middle. So as I was packing, my plan was anything that I don't care about can go into our checked baggage, but all my running gear had to go on a carry-on. And I could not sleep the night before we left because I didn't know if I was going to be able to take all of my gels because I didn't want to check them in. That was something that, I spent so much time perfecting nutrition that I was worried if I checked it in and if my luggage got lost, then I wouldn't have nutrition. And I didn't know in London what kind of, what nutrition sources do they have there? Do they have different companies? So thankfully, thank you to everyone who responded because I posted something on Instagram with, can I travel with my gels? And so many people responded and were so reassuring. I ended up putting all my gels in a plastic bag and that in the bag. And I got through the airport just fine. So I would say when I'm looking back at the trip, if I'm thinking of the rose metaphor, right? Like the highlight of the trip was definitely the marathon for me. Although I would say probably if you ask one of my daughters, her highlight of the trip was when we did afternoon tea. The other daughter really liked the Kensington Palace. We went to Kensington Palace the day before we left. They had this really cool exhibit, Crown to Couture. So my daughter, who's into fashion and like the celebrities, the oldest, she really loved that. If I had to pick something outside of the marathon that was a highlight for me was we did a day trip to the South England coast and we were able to see the cliffs and it was just totally different pace of life. But the marathon was really, it was right at the middle. It's like the crown jewel of the event, right at the middle. But I will say it is very challenging there were multiple things that were challenging. One, it was challenging to travel with my children.
I was going to ask if that was a conversation or what was because I know that a lot of I feel like it's a toss up on these big races if people bring their kids or not. I'm doing Chicago this year and I am going to bring my daughters, but when I did it the last time, my daughter was 8 months old and I did not bring her. But it was a conversation between my husband and I, right? Like, okay, so what kind of race is it going to be? What kind of experience do I want it to be selfishly? And then based it around that. So I'm curious on what your kind of what was the decision process and if your daughters get to come or not?
Oh yeah, no, my daughters definitely had a lot to say about it. And I think we kind of fall as parents, we fall into the camp of, oh, if we're going to have these adventures, we want our kids to come along too. So there is always this push and pull. Like there was definitely a moment during the trip where I thought, oh, next marathon, I'm going to come by myself because it's just, it's too much. And it's not too much that the parenting piece is so much. It's that because it was a new place for everyone, I really felt the pressure to go out and do the sightseeing things as well versus staying home and resting or shifting around whatever the plan was that we had for the day. So I think that it's that one right there is more on me because I could have spoken up and said, hey, today's a day where we really need to hang low or I need to hang low and you all can go do whatever it is you want to do. So that one I take accountability for it, that not speaking up for myself. But I think
a lot of runners struggle with that in destination races, right? Like whether it's overseas or not, like anytime you plan a trip with the race in the beginning, like at any point in your trip, like it definitely affects the rest of it and like how you feel and how you want to sightsee and what you do or what you don't kind of tackle in those days. And it can be really hard to decide not to do something. And a lot of times people make that mistake in spending too much time on feet in the days before all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think that I kind of planned it in such a way that we were doing some sightseeing, but not too much. So where it became tricky for us is that on Saturday, I asked so many people for recommendations. And on Saturday, we did one of the hop on, hop off buses because I thought, oh, here's a great way to see London without me being on my feet. I can sit the entire time. I'm okay. However, I did not anticipate that the bus ride was going to take 3 hours. So that one for me mentally, I was just like, how much longer? And again, also for me mentally, it was I'm on a bus. There's no bathroom. I want to drink water, but I don't want to drink water because then I don't want to pee and I don't know where it is. All the just silly things that, looking back on the trip, I would have just done something different that day. Instead of this hop on, hop off bus, I would have maybe done that another day. I would have just maybe even kept it more local to where we were staying, kind of explore that community. So we still had an outing for the day, but not so much this big 3-hour bus ride that then dropped us off. We got off in Piccadilly Circus because, again, people had recommended that to me. But Piccadilly Circus was like Times Square on steroids. So many people. I was immediately overwhelmed by that many people that as soon as we got off the bus, I said, all right, we're looking for the nearest bus, like the nearest train, we're leaving. Like I just couldn't stand to be around that many people on that day.
Well, the next day you're going to go be with tens of thousands of people again for hours, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what my husband and my family, like my husband and my kids made fun of me for that because they're like, but you just ran a race with all these people and you had trouble with Piccadilly Circus. I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Like, right. On Sunday, it's runners. Like, I know what everyone is there to do. They're either running or they're supporting a runner. Whereas in Piccadilly Circus, I'm like, I really don't know what people are here to do. Are they shopping? What's going on? It's just a lot of people. So,
well, and I think the day before a marathon, you're like, you start getting in that whole week before, really, like you start getting in your head about all of the things. Your schedule is so off because you traveled, but also because taper crazies are real and like you're not doing your normal. So many of us runners use running as like our mental outlet to help with like anxiety and with the pressures. And then we're not doing that in the taper. And it is a hard balance. And then to go throw yourself in so many new situations. It totally makes sense to me as you're saying it, that like I would do the same thing.
And thank you for highlighting that, because that was one of the things that I didn't fully think about. Like all we think about is the excitement of doing the race and of going somewhere new. We don't really think about the logistics of, yes, I've been tapering. I'm not moving as much as I want. And then I'm going to take a 9-hour flight across the Atlantic, go forward 5 hours in time. So that is something that for me, and again, because we traveled with the family, it worked out really well that we were there a solid 3 days before the race, because I could kind of adjust. Like there was enough time to adjust to the change in time zone. However, for me, it wasn't enough time to adjust to the meals. Like I was not, that Saturday before the race, Friday, same thing. I wasn't having my normal breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which again, like these are little things, but it does impact that overthinking that we start to do leading up to a race of, am I hydrated enough? Do I have enough fuel? Have I eaten enough carbs? That was just it. Because we would sleep in the time change again. I think Friday we slept in until 10:30 London time. It was my youngest. She didn't wake up until 11:30. So by the time we were up and out, that breakfast was actually like a lunch. And then our lunch was technically dinner. So the eating schedule was totally off on those days.
I didn't even think about how the time change would have affected that. Or like even your hunger cues, right, are going to be off because of that. Because your body's like, no, it's the middle of the night. I'm not hungry.
Your hunger cues, and I mean, we're runners here, so we can talk about it. Like even like your bathroom cues for like when you normally use the bathroom. That was all totally off for me, which I was like, okay, I mean, I'll take it on Marathon Sunday. I'm like, all right, I'll take it. Like, okay.
Well, like, what else are you going to do? It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. And it wasn't until that Monday where everyone in my household, we actually had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I was like, okay, well, again, this is kind of one of those things that I didn't realize I had to plan for, of those, like you said, the hunger cues, the meal times, any of that stuff. I mean, people, if anyone's listening to this and you're someone who just flew out for the weekend and you did the race, honestly, just so much props for you, because I was there 3 days before the race and I was like, wait, I'm still not adjusted. I don't understand. Like, I'm going to do my best, but I'm still not 100% adjusted to the time change.
So then what are you like, when you look back on the trip now, what would you say are you like most grateful for about the trip itself?
So the thing that I'm the most grateful for, and this is going to be, it's going to sound so mushy, but it's just, I'm so grateful for running, because running is what made that trip possible. I can't, at least at the moment, envision a situation in which we would have gone to London for a trip. I really, really can't. The reason we went to London was because I was running the marathon. So when I look back at the trip, it's with the gratitude that I feel is for this sport, that this sport is what created that opportunity to go somewhere new. It created the opportunity for my family to come with me to do it. So I'm just so grateful that running is in my life, because it opens up these doors to me that without running, I may never have seen or walked through.
I love that. I think it's so true. And is there anything that it made you want to do in the future? Like more travel with your kids or international trips or less, or
So this
we're
is
never doing that again?
yeah. So I mean, I don't think so. So the few things that I learned from this was, one, no trips during the school year with my children. That was quite challenging. So my kids both took their tablets with them so that they could do schoolwork, whatever homework
They
they
on
were.
any sort of break on either end? I know it was kind of near
No,
spring breaks. Okay, so theirs was already done.
no,
So they
my
missed
kids,
like a
there
week
was
of
no
school.
break. They missed a
Okay.
solid week of school. And I think some kids are okay with that and they roll with it really, really well. My kids did not roll with that very well. So there were nights where, again, I had them take their tablets because I didn't want them to fall so far behind that when they came back, they would feel really, really overwhelmed with having to catch up. So next time next time there won't be a next time with them just traveling during the school year. That was the biggest takeaway for me. I was like, nope, we're good. Like, it's totally okay. There are some experiences that they don't need to have, and it's fine. That was the biggest takeaway for me was the traveling with the children during the school year is a little bit hard, partly because they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And then secondly, or the other part of it is because I'm just not good at what they're doing anymore. Like, I was trying to do 6th grade math with my youngest for 2 hours one night. And I was just like, it's so obvious.
Parental
Why don't you?
torture.
It was so torturous, but I kept telling her, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I'm going to show you how I remember, but it's probably totally wrong compared to how your teacher's teaching you. But can you just please, there was even one math problem that I think we were on it for at least 20 minutes. And I told her, I'm like, can you just please get this math problem wrong? Like, can we just let it be wrong? And it's totally okay. Like, so I would say that's part of it. And I think going back to something that you said earlier, even for myself, is making sure that I give myself a lot of clarity. And this is for everyone. Just spend a lot of time figuring out what is your intention with the race that you're doing. And does a trip align with that intention? Does going with your family align with that intention? Because as I shared too, like, I felt a lot of pressure to make sure we're doing enough sightseeing, make sure everyone has their outing, because particularly my oldest, if she had to stay inside all day, she would have been miserable. And even if that would have been like what was best for me. So I think it's making sure you're spending enough time thinking about what's your intention for the race, and does having people go with you align with that intention? Does sightseeing align with that intention? I mean, if you're there for maybe a qualifying time, like if you're really focused on getting that time and you're really focused on making something happen, then it's about reducing, I guess, distractions Whereas I feel like my family is just, I love them, but that's a constant distraction, right? Like that is, and I'm sure you know it, right? Like when you're out with the kids, there's always this awareness of, is someone going to get hungry? Is someone going to need to use the bathroom? Do we need to stop? Can we keep going? Like there's all this background thinking that happens with them that doesn't happen if it's just me.
Well, and
So
even if you just go with friends or another person, like that can happen. Right? Like, okay, this person stays up later than I do, and they want to do this, and I want to do this, and they are going to spend 20 minutes picking out what we need to eat. And I want to eat and get home and go to bed. Like, there's a lot of that just with anybody, like a whole nother level with parents, but also just going with friends or a significant other or whatever. Like, there's less freedom on a trip than there is like at home to do things differently.
absolutely. I mean, there's only, I feel like on a trip, there's only so much that can be controlled because so much is out of your normal element that, yeah, I feel like just looking back, it was that one day that I'm like, next time I'm going to travel by myself for this. But obviously afterwards, and after I did the race, it was like, okay, no, I actually like the experience of having them here with me because they're, at least my family, they don't really care what time it took me to do. They're just happy to like hang out and like, okay, cool, you did it. Like I don't think, maybe when my kids are older, they'll get it a little bit more, but right now they're not impressed by any of it. And it's just, okay, mom she ran a marathon, cool, right? Like that's kind of
Yeah.
their mentality. And maybe it doesn't sound right, but it's such a grounding mentality because I feel like when I finish the race, and I've had races where I finished them and I have felt so bad, and I haven't had anyone there to kind of like give me that reality check or to keep me moving forward. So having them there was really that grounding thing that worked for me. So I feel like it can go either way, but it does come down to just being clear as to what's your intention with the race, and can you communicate? Can you communicate clearly with what you need as you prepare for the race?
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to what you said too, is that I was about people like your daughter's not caring necessarily about any of the details. There's an Allie on the Run podcast that I love. There was a live show she did with Anoush Arkelian and Emily Saul, who's like a sports psychologist. And they talked about how like Emily Saul went on this whole thing about how like your people don't care. Like your people don't care about any of the times. Literally, they care about nothing. Like even your best running friend doesn't care about the times you ran. They care about how you feel about your performance. So like even if you don't hit your time and you come back and you're proud of yourself, like they're going to be proud of you. If you come back and you had to like couldn't finish or something, like they're going to be proud of you because you did the thing and you tried. They just want you to be happy. Like that's, our people just want us to be happy at the end of the day. And it's all about how we perceive it, right? So like, bad races when you show up or at the finish line and you're not happy, your people are still happy for you, which is very
Yeah,
helpful.
which is great because you bring that up. And again, my family was there, and for them, the most stressful part was meeting up with me after the race. This is actually one of they've only been to the finish line of a handful of my races. And part of that is because when they were younger, my children, they would meet me at the end of a race. And then my little one in particular would want to be carried. And I'm like, no, I can't carry you. Like, no, I'm too tired. Like, mommy's sweaty. I'm hot. I'm like a grumpy person when I'm sweaty and I'm hot. So they stopped going to my races because of that, because I was like, I can't shift into carrying mom mode when I just finished a race and there's a lot of feelings, very overwhelming. But they did come to this one. And even then it was to meet me at the reception for the charity, which is what I told them. I'm like, you all meet me there. Don't worry about finding me at the finish line. We'll meet there. And the first thing out of their mouths was, how was it? It wasn't, what time did you finish? None of that. It was how was it? So it's like, yeah, here are the people that, the three people that matter the most to me. They didn't care anything about time. They just wanted to know, to what you're sharing, how was it? How did I feel out there? And I think that now that we're talking about, I'm like, yeah, okay. Remember, like that's even bigger than the finish time.
Well, and that's why we run, right? How was it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're kind of getting there. Let's talk about all things race.
All right, let's do it. What do you want to know?
Well, okay, let's start before we go into like the highlights and the lows of the race. What was your mindset? Like we've talked about it a little bit in like broad strokes, that you should have an intention and you should think about these things before your race. So like, what was your intention going into it? What were you thinking? All of that.
So let's backtrack. Yeah. So let's backtrack a little bit, because I think it's really helpful for us to discuss. And I'm sure you've had to have this discussion with some of your athletes as well, where it's your goal is not that one race, right? Like it's the one race is probably just a point on the journey of yourself as a runner. So back in October-ish, I think is when I decided that I wanted to run London, or when I had entered the lottery. It was October because the lottery was right after the race last year. And I entered the lottery. I didn't get in. And I immediately texted my coach with, okay, so this is what I'm thinking about doing, London Marathon. But if I do it, I think I want to do it as part of getting the 6 stars, the Abbott World Marathon Majors, 6 stars. My coach responded with, yes, do it. I'm so excited. And she was just so excited that I was like, okay, I think I should be excited too. And
how many stars do you have now? Is this your first? I have
now 4.
Oh, okay.
So I've done Chicago, London, Berlin, and New York City.
Okay.
And so her and I, we had a discussion, and I was telling her, I'm like, I think I want to do this. I feel like there's a piece missing from my puzzle of being a runner, where when I first started running, I did a lot of marathons, like very, very consecutively, and I go back to the year 2015, because that was such a pivotal year for me, where I did 3 full marathons and 1 ultra marathon, like a 50K.
You're crazy.
Yeah. But because back then I just wanted to see what I could do. It was truly just, what can I do? And can I have fun?
Like getting curious.
Very, very curious.
Yeah.
And honestly, over the years, I have lost that curiosity. And the past few years have really been about me trying to reclaim that curiosity for running and that curiosity for what I can do within the sport. So last fall, when I called my coach, I told her, I'm like, if I'm going to go big, why don't I try to go for this 6-star goal? Like that's something that is really unique. Not a lot of people have done that. And if I want to be motivated to do a marathon and do several more, it really does have to be something that's unique. So I ended up researching a bunch of charities to see which charity would be the best fit. I settled on Rays of Sunshine because I just loved it. My whole goal for running for London, before I even picked a charity, was to run in the most joyful way possible. So as soon as I went to their website and I saw the yellow and sun and children, I was like, okay, this is it. Like this has to work out. If it doesn't work out, I don't know what I'm going to do. And thankfully it did work out. We had that call. And it was, I went into it with 3 goals, which were to make sure my nutrition, like that was one of the ones where I'm like, I just want to make sure my nutrition is good, that I'm nailing it, that it feels good. But my main overarching goal was to finish the race wanting to do another marathon, because I had already planted that seed of going after the 6 stars. So I'm like, okay, how can I run in a way that's going to make it possible for me to want, not just do, because doing, I've always said it, that for me to get from start line to finish line, I don't doubt that my body can physically do it. I just question how much of a mental fight it's going to be for me to get there.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Like if I show up to the start line, I will get to that finish line. It might be really ugly, but like if I made it all the way through training and I'm at the start line, I'm gonna finish.
Oh yeah.
But how am I going to feel and what is going to happen between my ears on that journey is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. And I would say, and I don't know if it's the same for you based off of what you said, but it's really the thing I worry the most about when it comes to racing is my mental status. I don't doubt physically what I can do. So I did go into the race with a time goal. And I remember talking to my coach and she's like, I think this is what you can do. And I was like, that's great. But I think mentally I'm actually here. I don't think I'm there. I mean, I can see why you think I'm there, but mentally I was like, I don't know. And that's the thing where probably the thing that I've been trying to reflect a lot or just trying to understand about myself the most in this post-marathon life are the different levels of mental fitness that we need for a race. Because for me, I started off the race, and I'm getting into the race here. I'm getting into the race, so just pull me back when I need to pull back.
No, you're good. That's what we're talking about. All things race.
Yeah. So I started the race with the pace group that I had, the pace group that I myself even said, I think that's the pace group that I want to be in. And it was the 4:15 pace group. That's what I thought I had reasonably within my reach mentally.
And your coach's pace was faster. Your coach thought that you could finish
she
faster.
thought I could finish faster. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't really know. And, you know, this is why we have coaches too, because she took my feedback and then she also said, all right, but let's also, you know, if you feel good, go for that pace. But let's also keep in mind that yes, you're traveling, you're going with your kids, you're going across time zones, all that stuff. So we really don't know what the stressors are going to be on you and how they're going to manifest on race day. So I was really,
like you said, that mindset is so huge. And if you don't want to run a certain pace on race day, like you're probably not going to run that pace on race day because you told yourself that it's what you're not, like that you're not going to do it, right? Whereas if the belief is there, even if maybe the fitness isn't, you're significantly more likely to run that pace because you believe it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just like, oh my God, snapping the fingers here. So I started off with that 4:15 pace group. And
do you usually run with the pace group?
Okay. So this has been, oh my
gosh. I have very strong feelings about pace groups.
So listen,
so I'm curious.
So I have strong feelings about the pace groups in London, and and it just seems like such a silly thing to be kind of bothered with. So I thought, and when I spoke to my coach, I had said, oh, I really want to join a pace group so that I don't have to think about pace, right? So that I can just kind of keep up with them. I feel like you have two different types of pacers. You have the pacers that will engage you in conversation and try to motivate you and like explain the course to you, really do what they can to take your mind off of what you're physically doing. And then in London, in my experience, if someone is listening to this and they had a totally different experience, please let me know. The pacer just had a flag and then they just ran the race.
Well, pacers are just runners. Like you're just a runner who can say that you ran faster depending on what the race is if you've never like done anything, right? So a pacer is somebody who can prove that they ran a race a certain number of minutes faster than whatever that group is, and then you apply and you get picked. So there's not like a lot of places don't have training or things beyond that, like you apply, and that's the main requirement for a lot of pacers.
And I think
the bigger runners like us.
Yeah, and I think the bigger the race, the more it's like that, because this was years ago in Chicago. I ran a half marathon, and this was back in the day when I wanted to run a sub 2:10 for the half marathon. Like I was like, I really want, like that was my goal. And that pacer, I wish I could remember his name, but we need to put him, like he needs to be the model, because the entire race, he was like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are we going? Okay, we're going to go a little bit faster here. And it was like so much conversation and so much feedback. And then at the end, he told us, there's 2 miles left. I'm going to start to pick up the pace because now I want you to try to get below that. And I was like, okay, I think I can do it. And sure enough, as soon as I saw the finish line, he's like, there's the finish line. You need to go, 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 go. And I finished, and then they finished, and it was 2 pacers, but it was one of them that was really like hyping everyone up. He finished and he's like, you did it. It was so great.
That's amazing.
So that's where I'm like, I wish all pacers were like that, because it really, especially for those of us that like the social component of running, it is very, very helpful. But yes, the pacers in London were exactly what you described. It was someone who could run that time, and they had this big flag banner that said the time, and they just went off. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess as long as I can keep them in sight, I think I can do it. I think I can keep up. And then for me, it was usually by mile 5. That's that point in the race where I'm like, okay, am I going to be able to get that goal? Am I not? And mile 5 was one of those moments where, like, one of many moments in a marathon where you start to ask yourself of, is this sustainable? Can I continue this? Do I have the mental reserve to keep on with this effort? All those questions. And for me, the answer was just no. It was just no. I don't have it in me to continue running this pace, particularly because I had the plan of being with the pace group. And that's one of those moments in the race where, oh shit, I'm no longer with the pacer. And the pacer didn't even know I was with him to begin with. Like, I was just another runner out there. So I realized in that moment that the mental break that I was hoping to get from being with a pacer was not the reality of my experience. So from there, I just shifted to just finishing and doing the best that I could do on that day. I
It's
made
really
sure
early in a race to hit that point.
always, I can't, it's been like that for a while for me with the marathon, where it's just by mile 5.
I still have 21 miles to go to get to like where you're mentally deciding like just finish.
It's been, I would say, since 2016, all the marathons that I've ran, that 5-mile mark is that time period for me where it's either everything feels like it's clicking. And I don't want to say that it's not. A marathon is hard. It's going to be hard regardless of what you do. For me, it's always about balancing, where is the effort having to go and where do I have the reserves to put the effort there. So running and keeping a certain pace, that requires a certain amount of mental effort. Just like, and this is why I was saying that the past almost 2 weeks after this race, that's where I've been really curious about different mental fitnesses, that difference, because for me, in my experience, there is a big difference between having the mental fitness to fight for the pace, to finish for a specific time, and having the mental fitness to fight to finish. What I'm trying to do, and I'm going to continue to try to do this, is figure out what lies between those two types of mental fitness, whether it is nutrition, whether it is strength training, whether it is resting, whether it is hydration, whatever it is. How can I bring those two types of fitness into more alignment? And I'd be curious, I'm going to turn this around and ask you now, because that's, again, where I've been thinking. I go back and I think of the races where I have PRs. And in those races, I can just recall the sensation of, it wasn't easy, but it didn't feel so effortful. And I don't know if that's been your experience. Like, in those races, it's been that my mind is where my body needs it to be, and my body is where my mind needs it to be. So then the paces or the PRs or that accomplishment it happens. And yes, it's hard work, but it's not I'm digging my soul from the pit of my core to get it done. Has that been your experience?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's so much more, like you were saying, right? That a race is a point on a journey. And I think it kind of goes back to that idea, in that I always tell my athletes that the race is graduation, it's not finals week. So like the race is the celebration of all of the work you did. And like, yes, stuff can go wrong on race day. Like you can have GI issues. The best nutritionist like has GI issues during race day, right? Like it just, some days, the weather you can't control, like some days are just crap, and it is what it is. And you have to deal with the cards that you're dealt for the stuff that's out of your control. But I think a lot of the stuff that you can control affects how you show up on race day and how that mental plays into it. And I think for me, it's been a big combination of like practicing race pace and like, do you hit those workouts? Because if you're not hitting those workouts when you're in training, then you're not going to feel confident hitting them on race day. And then it gets in your head a little bit too. You're like, well, then I can't do that pace, even though I have other workouts that say I should, because I couldn't do like those threshold or tempo or long chunks of pace work, when you're in a half marathon or marathon training cycle. And this is currently the journey that I am in with the training cycle that I'm doing. Is I think that we often don't give enough credit for the fact that training doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like there's the training we do, and you can put in all the work and you can be doing all of the right things and your nutrition can be on point and you're doing the strength and you're doing the mobility and you're doing the yoga, but there is also the everything else going on in your life. And like, how much pressure does that take? Because that's going to be a huge part of your mind, your mental like reserves that you have to pull from when you show up on race day. Like, even if you gave yourself the 3 days before to just be in London with your family, like what was the 2 months like before? Like, were you burning yourself out? Because you're not going to show up on race day ready to crush it in PR for 26 miles. Like it's 26 miles if you've been burnt out for the last 3 months from not just training, but like everything else in your life. And I think that often gets not given the due credit that it needs.
Yeah. I tell people all the time that race day, it has to be the perfect storm in order for it to result in a PR. It really, or even just whatever your time goal is, like everything has to come together near perfect, right? Like I just feel like so much has to come together in order for it to be the day that you want. But I think and even in that's why it's so important to have multiple goals. And I tell people, and I've talked about this before, right? My 2017 Chicago Marathon, with that race, I had my goals. I had A goal, B goal.
I was there
C
too.
goal.
That's so funny.
Okay. So then that was
That was
the
a
race
rough day.
that was a rough day that truly, it was the worst marathon experience I've ever had. And now when I run any of these marathons, it's very, very much with the awareness that I am going to do everything possible to not repeat that day. And one of the things I learned from that race was the fact that we need to have so much diversity in our goals. We can have that time goal, but then it's also important to have a process goal, or it's also important to have a goal that is greater than this one race. So that is something that helped me a ton in London, because I went in with, I had told myself the time goal is the background music. If it happens, awesome. If it doesn't, that's awesome as well, because I knew what I did in training and I knew what I was capable of, right? Like I had said 4:15 for myself because that's where I thought I was physically and that's where I thought I was mentally. I thought, like, I remember talking to my coach and I'm like, I feel like that's so within reach for me right now. That's where I'm at. Race day comes, and like you said, there's all this silent stuff that you don't really realize whether it's traveling time zone, whether it's the lack of rest because you're on a 9-hour flight, and the stress of traveling, and the stress of doing, like, navigating an entire new system with the trains with your family, right? Like, those are all things that you're not really thinking about until you're living it. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, there's talk about all this, so much more time on my feet that day that we arrived to London, because we went to Expo and just all this other stuff that when I look back, I'm like, okay, yeah, those are all things that may have impacted me. But ultimately, those are things that could have happened and I could have still had the perfectly timed day, right? Like, it can truly go either way. But I went into London with that ultimate goal of wanting to do another marathon, right? Like, wanting to finish to do another marathon. So for me, London was just another stop on this path of being whoever I am as a runner, and on this path of whatever my running goals are. So for me, again, mile 5 was that mile where I'm like, yeah, like, I'm good. Like, I'm just good. I'm just going to finish this race. It's fine. Like, we're totally okay. And then what happened, and I'm so curious for other people, if anyone hears this that ran London, they can give me some feedback on it, because the course itself was not what I expected. And
In what way?
okay, so let me tell you. So, all right. So London has 3 different start areas, and it's not like most other races where it's just one big corral and then you kind of get into your corral and then you start in the same area. There are 3 different starts, and these 3 different starts converge at some point on the race. So 2 of the colored areas converge right before mile 1, and then that third converges with the other 2 right before mile 3. I had looked at the elevation chart, so I knew, okay, there's going to be this big climb in the beginning. It did not feel big. It was actually more of a gradual climb. I really
Known
didn't.
for being a pretty flat and fast course.
Okay. So I'm going to blame this on being in Miami. And yeah, you're laughing because my face, it's done so much. I'm from Miami. Miami is flatter than a pancake. Like, Miami is just flat. All right. So London, I went into it thinking, oh yeah, it's flat. Like, there's just that it's like a 300-foot change in elevation in the
Flat
first.
for everybody not near you.
Yeah, flat for everyone not near me. Let's just say that. What I didn't anticipate, there were 2 things that I didn't anticipate. There were a lot of smaller shifts in elevation because there were speed bumps, like a lot of speed bumps. Okay. So when it comes to the course itself, it's one, there were speed bumps. You're running up and down a lot of streets. And again, when you're walking it, you don't really you're not thinking about it. But when you're running it, it's like, oh, okay, I'm climbing up a street now and I'm kind of coming back down. So there were just more shifts in elevation than what I was prepared for. The course in several parts narrows down to a single lane. So if you're running a certain pace, but you get stuck behind a crowd of people that are running slower, you're just braking a lot harder than what you would if you're steady on your pace. The other part of the course that, I guess there's like 3 parts. So the other part of the course that really threw me for a loop was that you cross Tower Bridge, which is the big bridge that we all see pictures of, that we're like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. That's near the 13-mile mark. You go over this bridge, you make a right, and you spend the next mile running alongside people who are ahead of you, because you go into this big 9-mile loop. And in all my, I think I honestly, I focused so much on the elevation changes, like, of when I was studying the course. I didn't really focus on the course itself. So to cross into mile 13 and see all these runners going in the opposite direction was so disorienting for me, because I had no clue where they were compared to where I was. So the whole time, and I realized this afterwards, once I got home and I looked at the map, I'm like, that's why, because I didn't even see the mile marker. I missed a few mile markers on top of it. So I was just so disoriented on that loop where I had no clue where I was in space. And for some of us, But for me, when I'm running these long distances, I need those markers. Like I need to know here's this landmark, which means I'm here in time and space. And the race is, I had none of that for that entire 9-mile loop. So it was really, really, for me, very disorienting. So again, when we're talking about the mental energy of sustaining a race, those 9 miles for me were spent telling myself that it's okay to trust the crowd, that it's okay to just keep moving forward, which it sounds so silly and it sounds stupid because obviously you're going to keep moving forward because that's the direction everyone's going in. But at the same time, because I hadn't expected there to be a loop, or I hadn't, like I'm running and I'm seeing on the opposite side of me, the Pacers for 3:30. And all I could think was, wait, how far behind am I? Like, where are they? And then where am I? And how far behind? It just put me into a whole different mental tailspin that I wasn't expecting. That when we're talking about what's something I'm going to pay attention to going forward, I'm going to study courses now, like I'm going to just like for a test. I'm going to study the courses like I'm studying for a test, because that to me was so disoriented that I felt really ungrounded in the experience of running the marathon. And this is just something that's so particular to me, but I just did not appreciate the sensation of feeling lost while I was running, and the sensation of, okay, I just need to trust that I'm going to keep going forward. Again, I know that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep moving forward. But at the same time, it's really nice to know, like, all right, here's mile 13, and I'll loop back here when I'm at mile 22. If I would have seen that, that would give me some kind of goal to work through that stretch of miles. So that for me was pretty challenging when it came to the race. And that's why it wasn't as expected. I didn't really anticipate that loop being like that. And all just the smaller speed bumps and changes in elevation. I mean, you're running through a city, right? Like you're running along city streets. So there are going to be changes in elevation. And that was just something that I mentally had not prepared for.
I think it's hard. I think those miles in a marathon are often, in my last marathon, I joke that like I literally have no idea. I couldn't tell you what I was thinking about from about mile 14 to mile 21. Like those 7 miles are just, I don't know. It was over an hour and I can't tell you what happened. And so I think that that's like the part where the mental training comes in. But I also think that it's super common in marathons in that point to like, you are mentally tired by then. You're 2+ hours in and your mind starts to do weird things on you, right? Like I've done marathons where there's a half and a full marathon, and that's usually where the half marathon breaks. And that can be really demoralizing because all of a sudden there's no crowd support. There's like a third of the people you were just running with now, like, you know, the crowd is gone, the people you're running with are gone. So I think that it just kind of is the nature of the beast of a marathon too, that like those miles are where you're far enough from the finish that you're not ready to like go for it, but you're also far enough along that you're tired.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. That those middle miles after the halfway point are, I don't even know. All I remember is telling myself during that time to focus on the fact that I was in London. Like that was that's something that I kept repeating to myself. You're in London, you're running a marathon in London, you're running the London Marathon, your family's here, like you're doing this, all these people with you are doing it. So anything that I could say to myself to take away from the how many more miles am I in? And that's something that usually happens too, right? When we're in a race where it's like, okay, we're at mile 13, we got the second half to go. We're at mile 15. All right, there's 11 more miles to go. And I really did not, that's something that I knew for sure going into the race. I did not want to experience that. I did not want to go into that countdown, because for me personally, anytime I've gone into that countdown, almost this sense of desperation starts to creep into my body of like, how much more, how much more am I, so it was anytime I would start to think about it, I would say, okay, but you're in London, you're here, you're good. And I will say the London Marathon, the crowd support is phenomenal. I mean, so many people out there. The weather on the day was, I think it was in the 40s and 50s and raining, and people were still out there. And if you see pictures of the race, we're talking about like 5 people deep of people alongside the race. So that was something that was so helpful, and just why I love people who go out to support runners, because it's so necessary. I was someone who was very confused as to where I was, but the people screaming, I'm like, all right, I can't think about my confusion when everyone's screaming my name or screaming to keep going or like handing out candy. So yeah, talk about if there was only a way we could replicate those miles, and only those miles in training, right? Like, you don't have to run the 18 miles, but let's pretend you're living through miles 15 through 18. What are the thoughts that come up? That would be great, because that is kind of like a void of thought. There's just so much. And yet, I mean, I can remember a lot of what I thought, because I kept just repeating the same sentences over to myself so that I could remember that this isn't, running a marathon is so fascinating, especially now. And when we're on social media, right? We see it seems like everyone's running a marathon. And as I was out there, I kept telling myself, but not everyone is, right? Not everyone is, not everyone wants to, not everyone can. And a lot of people don't believe they can. So you're out here, you're doing it, kind of focus on that.
It's like finding the gratitude, right? Even if it's not specifically saying gratitude, like that's what you were doing. Okay, so talk us through the final miles.
All right.
Been through the rough ones. Now you're like mile 22, mile 23.
All right. So this is a story because I truly believe that stuff comes up in races sometimes that never comes up in your training. So again, for me, I live in Miami, and whether it's Miami or not, I don't know. I did a lot of bridge repeats here, a lot of that while I was here, because I was so paranoid about going to London and not feeling prepared for the elevation. So paranoid about that.
Because that's the only way you guys get hills, right? Is like bridge repeats. Yeah.
Bridge repeats, right. So by mile 20 of the race, I'm like, my knee doesn't feel good. Like, what's going on here? And it felt like grinding in my knee. And it was my left knee in particular. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, what's going on? So I send my coach a quick text message with, hey, I'm at mile 20, but my knee is bothering me. So I'm probably going to run walk the rest of this, because my goal is more marathons. My goal is not to kill myself, just to finish this one. So as I'm running that last 10K, I stopped probably twice more. So at mile 20, I stopped because I'm like, hey, what's going on with my knee? And I think I took another stop at mile 22 and 24 to walk, to use the bathroom, to be like, okay, what? Like that reassessment of like, what's going on? Can I run? Has it been, obviously at that stage in a race, form gets really sloppy. So I knew for myself, okay, I need to stop to like either stretch, like pull my knees up, or just something to help me reconnect with form. And I'm running, and in those final few miles, I'm thinking, oh, I really need to fix my strength training routine. Like, this is what I'm thinking. My knee is talking to me, and I'm thinking about doing deadlifts. Like, when I finish this run, I need to be better with my deadlifts. Like that's what I was thinking about. And so So mile 20 to 22, again, that's still that vortex of I don't really know where I'm at. And finally I see, I'm like, all right, okay, now I know. Now I know where we're at. I know like I'm no longer in this loop situation. I'm going to keep running. And I believe it's before mile 24 or right after mile 24, or I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know.
Yeah.
But
Right about that point in the marathon.
somewhere there, you pass by Big Ben. And that for me was that moment of knowing. And it seems so, again, it seems so silly, but that was the moment where I was like, I am going to finish this race. It wasn't mile 20. It wasn't anything. It was that mile 24-ish Big Ben where I knew without a doubt I was going to finish the race. And I'm like, even if I have to stop and like stretch my knee out or just whatever the case is, I'm going to finish this race. So
by the time you're done a full marathon training cycle, 2 miles is like nothing.
Nothing. At that point, it's like, I'm like, all right, even if I walk it, it's 30 minutes. Like I can power walk this baby in 30 minutes. No problem. So the final few miles from mile 20 to probably 26, because at that point, once I hit 26, I'm like, oh my God, like there's really no thoughts other than I'm finishing. Like that's really the only thought. But from miles 20 to 26, it was a lot of thoughts about my knee and am I going to be okay? Is it going to be something like I was just so concerned about making sure I wasn't running in a way that was going to cause any long-term damage or really affect my post-marathon running plans. And so I slowed down. Like I said, I took my stops, I stretched. I was totally okay. I'm like, it's great. And you know what? I would say one of the things that I appreciated about the London Marathon was no one said anything if you walked. Like, I feel like I've done some races and you walk and people are like, come on, you can keep going. You're almost, no one said that. Like I would walk and people would just scream my name out even more. And I'm like, all right, that's great. Like this is great motivation. No problem. So
that was something I saw that was unique about London was that they don't change their finish line at all until the last runner crosses. Like it's very, like I saw lots of videos of like the last runner crossing and it's still like very cool and very different than most marathons are.
I am so glad you pointed that out. I just got goosebumps because of that, because I remember following the London account and being so impressed that they celebrated that last runner as much as they celebrated the first runner. And I hadn't seen that anywhere either, right? Like not, I mean, I've seen some races post about it like in a story.
The New York After Dark is the only one that I think is similar that like that I could remember. I'm sure there's smaller races that do a great job, but that I could remember like off the top of my head when I saw it and I loved it.
That was, that was something that I was so impressed by that. And I think it speaks to the London Marathon. So let me just go back. Let me go back to miles, 20 to 26, my knee, I'm thinking about deadlifts and squats and like, what do I need to do to strengthen?
Yeah, you're already out of the marathon. You're like moving on.
You don't understand. At that point, I was just like, okay, we need to finish because then as soon as we finish, I need to make sure I'm strengthening what I need to strengthen so I don't experience this again. It was the weirdest experience of a marathon for me. Truly, truly so unique. And then mile 26, you're coming in, like you're running into Buckingham Palace. So, like you can see the park around you and you're like, it's happening. Like totally, it's happening.
Let's go.
Make a right-hand turn. And it's like the last 200 meters. Like it's really not much. And I was like, that's it. I finished. But it was also like a weird finish because I finished and it was just like, okay, I finished. Like, I don't know. Like, yes, there was crowds. Like they had stands set up with the crowds, but it was still like you finish, you walk. And I think I'm just so spoiled by other races that have big, like race sponsored after parties type of thing, where it's like they have the food tents and I think maybe this is only in America where you have like the beer tents, but they have space set up for after the race for you to hang out. You've done the Chicago Marathon. So, like the 27-mile party, they have the entire field with vendors, your gear check.
And you a beer as you cross the finish line.
Here it was just like you cross the finish line, you get your medal, you pick up a bag with your race shirt, water, the whatever their version of like Gatorade is, and
So
an
there's not
oat
like a
bar.
finisher's shoot where you're like collecting all the things and whatever.
No, for me, it was just kind of like I finished and I was like, okay, I'm done. Like I'm done. Like that. It was just that. It wasn't again, and I compare a lot of races to Chicago because that's the one I've done the most and I have the most experience with. But Chicago, you know, they have like the band set up and they have different like runner reunite areas.
Yeah.
I didn't experience that in London. I didn't see, and maybe there was that. I just didn't see it. I
Well, and you
collected
didn't need to coordinate it, right? Because your family was meeting you at your
right,
fundraiser party
right.
after.
Yeah, so I got my medal, I got my bag with my shirt, and then I picked up my gear check and I walked out and I was like, oh, that's it. Like I'm done. Like there goes the marathon experience. It's done. So it was definitely an experience, but when I finished, I was crying because you and me and all of us, and when I say you, I just mean the universal you, you really, really never know what's going to get thrown at you over the course of 26.2 miles. For me, that was my 10th marathon and the very first time I've ever experienced any pain in my knee. So I'm like, all right, well then this is the punch that we're rolling with and it's okay. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the importance of having not just time goals, but more process-based goals. Because imagine if I was on pace and then mile 20, my knee would have acted up. I probably would have been, instead of saying, okay, well, this is something I need to fix later, I probably would have gotten really frustrated with myself and really frustrated with my body for not performing how I wanted it to perform. Or I would have gotten really angry that like, why is this happening? Whereas, and I'm not saying that this is how a lot of people respond. I'm just saying for myself, I know that I would have responded with less compassion to myself if the time goal was the only goal I had, and that the only reason I didn't meet the time goal would have been, oh, because of something anatomically or physiologically speaking that wasn't working for me. So when I finished, I was crying because I'm like, oh, I did it, and everyone else is doing it, and I even posted on my Instagram account like just a series of I literally pulled out my phone. I was like, let me write all these thoughts right now, like as soon as I crossed the finish line. And it was just that it doesn't matter how many marathons I've done, I'm always going to be emotional. Another
marathon, it pushes you, right? Like it's going to take you, like we talked about mindset so much, right? Like it pushes you to the limits, like not only physically, but mentally. So by the time you're done, like your body is going to respond however your body responds when you are depleted. So different things for different people. But like, I feel like tears are very normal and common and acceptable at a marathon finish.
Yeah. I mean, I was just like, again, and you've said it's very similar for you. To me, the finishing of London was more than anything that mastering my mind. And it was an experience of never once throughout the 26.2 miles did I think, why am I here? Why am I doing this? I never had that thought. And anytime something that I was like, oh, that might be negative came up, I would tell myself, oh my God, but you're in London. Like, remember, you're here.
Yeah.
That was really it. Remember, you're here. And the charity, the week of the race, the organizer of the charity, he told us, and it was just in passing, just said, hey guys, remember, miles for smiles. So that was also something that I would tell myself while I was out there of like, this is miles for smiles. This isn't just me. This isn't about me. Yes, I'm the one that's running it, but these miles mean something more than just me finishing.
So what did that charity sponsor? What
Okay,
were they, or what do they do? We didn't talk about that earlier.
okay, so all charities are different. Obviously, I've done a lot of fundraising for different charities. This has been by far the best charity experience I've ever had. If anybody wants to run London and they want to run it for charity, which that's something I wanted to say as well, which I think the reason London celebrates that final runner as much is that the London Marathon is actually their single biggest charitable donation day. So the majority of people who run London are running it for charity. You can look out into the crowd and it is a sea of shirts for different charities.
Which changes the makeup of the field and the ability level of the field so much.
Completely. And I mean, there's the lotto and people still get in that way, but there's something about, for me as well, again, I was just really mindful of this or aware of it, that a lot of us here are running because we fundraised for an organization, because we're contributing to something. Whether you pick an organization at random, you're still committing to raising, anywhere between $3,000 to $10,000 US for that organization, right? So Rays of Sunshine, what I liked about them, so Rays of Sunshine is an organization that it's a grant wishing organization for children in the UK. Their fundraising minimum was 2,300 pounds, but I challenged myself. I'm like, I'm going to do 2,500 pounds. So I'm still fundraising. I'm going to meet it. The beautiful part, and this is something that I really want to highlight for people and make sure that people understand, to do their research on charities, because some charities, you are on the line for whatever you don't fundraise. So there are some charities that'll require you to give a credit card guarantee. And if on race day, you don't meet your fundraising, they will charge you. Then there's some charities like Rays of Sunshine, they give you 3 months after the race to finish your fundraising, which is incredibly generous.
Yeah, that is.
In the lead up to the race, they had a WhatsApp group. So everyone that was on the team was there, and unique to them that I haven't seen in any other organization that I've fundraised for, they had a fitness professional there, and he provided us he's like, here's a training plan if you need it. Here's a nutrition plan if you need it. Here are exercises to see where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are. It was just, the full scale of an athlete was covered. And WhatsApp group, all these resources, monthly meetings, and then monthly check-in calls where they would call you and they would say, how are you doing? How is training going? This is how much you fundraise. What help do you need to fundraise more? What are your ideas for fundraising? So much just hands-on connection that for me, once I arrived in London, I'm like, oh, I know these people. We're good.
Yeah, that's the best feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. So then they sent over our race shirt and with the letters to iron on your name. So I had my name ironed on. The day of the race, they had a reception that was maybe a quarter mile away from the finish area. So pretty close to the area. The reception was so lovely. And
that's where you met your family after the race, right?
That's where I met my family. They had massage therapists there giving everyone 10-minute massages after the race, which was great.
Yep.
Loved it. They had food there for the athletes. The athletes got a mimosa, like a celebration. Yeah, I was like, I'll take it. Water, and then just a balloon archway. Their character logo was there. It really was such a wonderful celebration. And a goodie bag. The goodie bag was full of just so much incredible stuff that really highlighted how grateful the organization was for the runners. That was just it. When I looked through it, I was like, are they for real? It was like deodorant, cupcakes, candy bars,
everything.
So many different things that I was like, oh wow, they really this is nice. Facial cleansing products, a chapstick. It was just so many different things that really, really made me feel very appreciated, because sometimes with charitable organizations, you'll you'll get a race shirt and then maybe a reception, but not much support throughout or much communication throughout. But here, to me, and maybe it's just how London is with their people, with their charities, but they just knocked it out of the ballpark in terms of support for the runners. And I'll never forget one of the first meetings that we had on Zoom. The fitness professional came on, Fitness Phil, and he came on and he's like, in my experience, 25% of people who start to train for a marathon don't make it to the start line because of injury. And my goal is to help each and every one of you get there. And that was just something that was so comforting because, again, they had us on the marathon training side of things and then a lot of support on the fundraising side of things as well.
That's awesome. I'm so glad. Okay. I feel like we're in the wrap up. So quick highlight of the race.
Highlight of the race was seeing the charity at miles 13 and 22. Talk about just instant
Like they had
tears.
a cheer station or like a tent set up?
Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, as soon as I saw all the yellow shirts, I was like, I'll say, I have to share the picture that they caught of me, but there's a picture of me like this, like I'm
ugly
trying to
crying.
tell them not to, because I'm crying and I'm like, no, don't take the picture. It's so good. So that, I would say that was the highlight because it was that reminder of I'm here because of them.
And what was the worst part? We kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you had to
Yeah, the worst part for me was the level of disorientation and not having known the course. Like that was for me even worse than my knee at mile 20, just feeling so lost on a course.
What are you most grateful for?
I'm so grateful that I have a body that is able to do the things that I'm asking it to do.
And then what's next? You talked about wanting 6 stars. So what's your next?
Okay. So this is where I'm sharing this for the first time here. I haven't even shared it with my coach yet.
Surprise!
Surprise to everyone here. But I did tell her that I had like a 2-year plan. I'm like, I have a 2-year marathon plan now, which is really exciting for me because I haven't had that in a very, very long time. So immediately what's next is I have, for the first time in my decade plus of running, I have taken 2 weeks off completely from running.
Good. That's what you should do.
That is what I should.
Congratulations.
I know. I feel so proud of myself. And I'm like, so come Monday, when I have my first run, I'm already expecting it to just kind of hurt, and feel a little bit awkward. But immediately I was very much so looking forward to that and just seeing if I'm going to tell people to do this, I should be doing it too. Right.
Yep.
I've gone the gamut of run streaking with marathons, with running the day after a marathon, and all of that stuff is great. But I was just curious as to what happens when I actually rest after a marathon. So I've got my 2 weeks of rest ends on Sunday. Monday, I start running again.
It's Friday today, so she has 2 days left.
It's Friday, yes, Friday, May 5th for anyone who's hearing this. I'm kind of on a little countdown there with the running. After that, I will have 2 solid months before I start training for Marine Corps, which is what I will be doing in October. And my plan is to spend the next 2 months in this off season to get really, really strong. And by getting really strong, I mean lifting weights and lifting heavy weights and kind of pushing myself to get strong in ways that aren't always possible when the priority of training is running. So here I'm in this space where running is there to maintain that base and a certain level of fitness, but I'm not necessarily training for anything. So I'm going to take advantage of strength training. But in an ideal world, in an ideal world where I'm feeling this good and this happy and this excited and this curious, it would be Marine Corps in October, going after my 5th star in Boston next year, if I can get in. And my route of getting in is like either through charity or through the World Marathon Majors, they have this new thing where it's the Journey to Six
Mhm.
Stars. So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, maybe I can get in through that lottery, perhaps get in. Then it would be, I would really, again, so I have Marine Corps in October, and because I can be a little type A with stuff in the planning, Marine Corps.
As most runners are. And then
Yeah.
Boston.
And then Boston. And then I would actually like to do Chicago again next fall. So fall of 2024, because it's my favorite race. It's truly is, even though I've had some of my most heartbreaking moments at that race, it is my favorite race. And that city is my favorite city. And then maybe if it all works out, wrap up this 6-star journey in March of 2025 in Tokyo. So that's kind of the plan I have.
The
I'm like,
big extended plan. I love it.
extended plan, if everything lines up and I'm able to get
It's a lot
into.
of marathons in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want it to be, I think that was a big takeaway for me in London, of being a person. And it's not, I don't want to think more of myself than what I do, but just hopefully being someone who can kind of inspire people to take on the challenge, regardless of the pace. Of, if running a marathon is something that you want to do it. Don't wait until you're fast enough. Doesn't matter. Just do it.
Well, there
Just
is no fast enough.
right. But there is
Yeah,
no
I
fast.
know.
But we get it all the time of, oh, I wish I could run, but I'm too slow. And I'll
Yeah.
ask people, what do you mean too slow? And they're like, 12, 13-minute mile. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's perfect. That's a wonderful pace. That's great. So that was something that came up for me a lot in London, especially being around so many people who are running for charity. And again, there are people running for time, right? Like, that's a race where world records have been set, or records have been set. But it was also this realization, or this remembrance, that runners come in all shapes, sizes, and pace. And sometimes what prevents people from participating in this wonderful sport is seeing people do it despite all of that. And so, yeah, when I think of my plan, I'm like, yeah, it's mostly because, one, I'm so curious now myself of what I can do, but it's also just hoping that someone out there sees it, and the doubt that they had as to their ability to do something like that, maybe the doubt gets a little bit quieter, and maybe for them, they get a little more curious as to what they're able to do. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's so exciting. So much good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited/nervous, because this was such a great training cycle. It was a different training cycle than what I was used to. It was, fall/winter, whereas Marine Corps is summer, and I am notorious for not doing well with the heat. But I will take what I learned about myself from this training cycle, which was to simply take each run as it is, to not overthink it, and I think about you in particular often on a lot of my runs, because I'm like, okay, I'm borrowing belief today. That's the borrowing belief run that my coach gave us because she thinks I can do borrowing belief right now. So I think that's something, the more broader thing of all these races and all these dreams for running is going to be to continue to hone in that mental chatter. And as I shared earlier, just bringing into better alignment the mental fitness for pace and the fitness for finishing, so that maybe I could have a race where every goal I set for myself does come together in a way that feels less effortful.
Which would be another part of the goal, right? Coming together, all of it.
Yeah, that's like the overarching goal, right? That's the big goal right there. It's have everything come together nicely. And if it doesn't, then you've got this part, this part, this part, this part. And either way, just being really proud of taking that chance, because that's what I see marathons are. Marathons are us deciding we want to take a chance on ourselves to do something hard. And crossing the finish line is in its own way, the closing of that particular phase or that particular chapter in the runner story of like, yeah, you believed in yourself so much, you got through training, you got to the start line, you made it through the race itself, and then you finished. So there's a lot of just, it's like a kaleidoscope, just so many different things
Yes.
kind of say right now. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait. We can do it again. Do this again after your next race. You're all about it.
Yeah, we're totally going to do it again. But before we finish this conversation, I know you have some exciting stuff coming up, and I just want to give you an opportunity to share and let us know what's going on with you and how we can support you and be your cheerleader as well.
Well, thank you so much. On my own running front, I have a half marathon on May 21st. I'm doing Mountains to Beach. And then, like I mentioned before, I'm doing Chicago in October, which I'm so excited about. My husband lived in Chicago for a period of time, so we get to take our girls there. And then on the run coaching front, in June, I am opening enrollment for my group training for fall races. So if you're running a half marathon or marathon this fall and want a training plan that will incorporate all that good strength training that Stephanie talked about needing to incorporate, that is there. So you can find more information on that at misadventuresofaMarathoner.com.
Okay. All right, y'all. If there's any other questions anybody has, you know where to reach both of us. I'll include it in the show links so that everyone knows where to get a hold of us, where to ask those questions. But Jen, thank you so much for just agreeing to be here with me. And I can totally see this just being our thing now. After every race I finish, you come on and you interview me about it, and we just kind of like decompress and talk about stuff.
I always say my favorite part of coaching is like the pre-race pump up and then the post-race evaluation. So anytime.
I love it. Let me tell you, it's just us runners. We love it. I love it all.
We do.
I'm like, just tell me everything. Tell me all of it. So, all right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see ya on the next one. Bye.
Bye.